You're listening to Piper's Daughter from the 12 Strippers of Christmas, by Lulu M. Sylvian.
Rose stared into the pit. The open hole of her father's grave. He had always taken care of everything. All she needed to do was cook, do what he called cleaning, and not argue much. He had always taken care of everything. She had never even had a job. She didn't know what to do next. He wasn't there to tell her what she should think, how to feel. Maybe now she could be angry. Who was going to stop her? She tore her gaze from absently staring at the hole that held her father's coffin, realizing everything had gone quiet. Snow fell, muffling the sounds of the world. No one, not even the groundskeeper who would later fill in the grave, was around. Alone. Alone with her thoughts, alone with the ghosts. He had always taken care of everything, except for me. Well, that was typical. She hadn't needed to decide a single thing regarding the funeral. All of the arrangements had been finalized years ago. He even specified what types of flowers he wanted. No roses, never roses. A car had picked her up from the house, driven her to the church, followed the hearse to the cemetery for a graveside service, and promptly left as soon as she'd stepped out. Now everyone was gone. Had her father done this on purpose, or had he assumed one of the members of his church would take her home? She shook her head, the tight bun a heavy counterweight to the slight movement. To have done this on purpose would have required that he actually considered someone other than himself. This was an oversight, a mistake, but then again, he never had cared what happened to her. Rose pulled the pins from her hair, letting the thick golden locks fall in waves down her back. She ran a hand through the strands, tugging every few inches as tangles trapped her fingers. First things first, she was going to cut her hair. It was too heavy, too unruly to manage at this length. Father had never let her. She would make appointments, and he would find a reason not to drive her into town, or he would conveniently be out of money. He could no longer sabotage her, he could no longer threaten her if she cut it herself. Rose sighed. Second things second. First, she had to get home, then she could worry about a haircut. She leaned against a headstone and dusted snow from her shoes. No reception, no reason for anyone to come looking for her. No family and no friends. She was going to have to walk. She hiked up the hated pantyhose. They weren't good for anything, and they certainly didn't keep her warm against the cold. Her shoes, basic black pumps, were only suitable for looking pretty. She would have to walk in the middle of the road to avoid slipping in either the snow melt in the sun or the ice patches in the shade. It was a few miles into town, and another 3 or 4 to the house. The day was cloudless, so she would have light, and maybe some warmth, whenever the sun broke through the redwoods and other conifers that blanketed this part of the Sierra Nevada. Even with the unusually low snowfall they'd experienced this year, she'd be cold, wet, tired, and blistered by the time she reached home. There was no reason to delay getting started. The winter sun beat down on Jimmy's back, making this hot work even hotter. Fool that he was, he hadn't taken off the black suit jacket until he had already started sweating. He hated hand jacks. Foot jacks were more effective and faster, but he hadn't found one. He cranked and cursed as the vehicle jerked and lifted off the tire.
Crap.
He grunted as he pulled the spare from the hearse. He slid backward on the steep embankment as the spare overbalanced him. He managed to keep to his feet. He needed to keep his mind on the task at hand before he ruined his suit or injured himself. However, his thoughts were on the young woman whose father they had buried. When he'd left the cemetery, there had hardly been anyone left but her, and she'd looked so frail and serious. The oversized bun on the top of her head reminded him of a little bitty thing playing dress-up. But the resemblance to a child ended there. She was petite, but she was no little girl. Those were a woman's curves and a woman's lips, and man oh man if Rose St. John hadn't grown up well. In high school, she had been a mousy little thing. She sat in front of him in world history. Cheating off her tests had probably been the only thing that kept him from failing. He hadn't even remembered her name until he saw her today, as they loaded the coffin into the back of the hearse. She stood somber and quiet during the service. probably in shock since her father had just died. Jimmy hadn't wanted to desert her at the cemetery, but Toby ordered him to deliver the coffin and leave. Jimmy hadn't felt right in his gut, driving away and leaving Rose alone. In fact, his current situation had been caused by his guilt. He'd swung the hearse into a wide U-turn to go back and make sure she had a ride home, and that was when the tire blew. Jimmy wiped his hands together, as if he could clear away the grease and not just smear it around. A familiar movie tune wafted past on the breeze. He looked down the road, trying to locate the source of the off-key singing. A cloud of thick golden tresses swirled around a tiny black-clad figure in the freezing wind. In shoes not fit for walking, she high-stepped and skipped her way over the ice and rocks on the side of the road.
"Is that you, Rose?"
When she heard the man's voice, Rose froze. Focused on the road and watching her step, she hadn't noticed the hearse on the shoulder until he called out to her, the tall, good-looking one, the one who'd cheated off her tests in high school. The one she'd always hoped would talk to her since she had let him cheat, but nope. Boys didn't talk to her in high school, and men didn't talk to her now, 7 years later. James? What was his last name? He'd played football and basketball, a total jock. Even as a teen, he'd been broad and muscular. And now, his white dress shirt showed off his even broader adult shoulders. The rolled-up sleeves emphasized the unseasonal tan of his strong forearms. Clearly he now worked for the funeral home. He'd helped to carry the coffin earlier, and here he was with the hearse. The butterfly flutters in her tummy proved she still had a bit of a crush on him. "Oh hi. Did you get a flat? Need some help?" Not that Rose could do anything, but she had been well trained to at least offer assistance.
"No, I'm good. Just finished. You aren't walking home, are you? Where's your ride?"
he asked. Rose threw back her head and cackled. "You're funny. Why would I have a ride? I'm pretty sure that damned old bastard made sure that I would be stranded at the cemetery after the funeral. So no, I don't have a ride because my father was a selfish prick." Her voice was thick with knives and resentment. She bit her lip, shocked at her own audacity, speaking ill of the dead. Speaking ill of her father to James, who was essentially a stranger.
"That would explain why I heard you singing, 'Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead.'"
He smirked. Busted. Rose grinned sheepishly, relaxing because he hadn't criticized her musical selection at such a time.
"Can I give you a lift home, Rose?"
Her heart sped up and her breathing caught in her throat. James the test cheater knew her name. "I would love that. It's James, right?" He nodded.
"Jimmy Erickson."
"Oh right." She completely remembered everything about him now. "Could you maybe give me a ride to a place that cuts hair?" She held up the long weighty mess like a dead fish. It felt like this was the one thing she needed to do now that her father was dead. She hoped that once the hair was gone, the memories the hair held would disappear too.
"You want to cut all that off?"
Jimmy asked.
"It's pretty."
It was nice that he thought her hair was pretty, but it was too late to change her mind. It was her hair, and she was finally able to do what she wanted with it. Rose scoffed. "Then you can have it. I want it all gone." James leaned against the hood of his own car, waiting for Rose. He wanted to make sure she saw him when she got out of the beauty salon, and didn't try to walk the rest of the way home. She had insisted that she would be fine and could walk from downtown, but now that he'd busted a tire on her behalf, he felt somewhat responsible for her. She'd been super shy in school, but this afternoon on the ride back to town, she was different. She chatted nervously, the small solemn figure by her father's grave completely gone. He had managed to find out she wasn't seeing anyone, but he hadn't been able to get a word in edgewise to ask her out. He dropped her off at Sally's Shears before swinging by the funeral home to pick his own car up, a classic fastback Mustang. Jimmy was slowly restoring the vehicle. It was still a beater, but it was a beater with good bones. He saw her before she saw him. Lithe and waif-like, she looked around for him, before breaking into a broad bright grin when they made eye contact. Rose flew into Jimmy's arms. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her lips to his. As soon as the initial wave of shock washed over him, he began kissing her back. Lips, tongues, arms. He pulled her into his chest and let her consume him with her passion. Rose kissed him as if she had been kissing him for years. She knew what she was doing, without hesitation. "Thanks," she said breathlessly after she stepped back. "I feel so much lighter now." Jimmy smiled at her. He didn't know what had brought on the lip lock, but if that was what driving a beautiful girl to the hair salon did, he would drive her here every day. As for her hair, it was gone. The golden waves were now close cropped on the sides and back, with a long curl on the top of her head falling into her face. Maybe it was the hair or the makeup she had applied while in the salon, but he hadn't noticed how big her golden eyes were before, or how delicate and pointy her chin was. She looked like a fairy. Now he understood the term pixie cut. Rose spun in a circle on the sidewalk in front of him, arms wide as if she tried to grab onto the world. She giggled and smiled brightly. Jimmy laughed. Rose's joy was contagious. And right now Jimmy would do about anything for her to kiss him like that again.
I like your hair. Now what?
When she stopped spinning, she said, "I want to have sex and I want pie. And jeans. I want to wear pants again." She clapped her hands over her mouth and blushed. Jimmy was pretty certain his eyes popped out of his head at her comment. When her gaze fell on his face, she stammered, "Not necessarily in that order. Jeans first, then pie. I want to get out of these dreary funeral duds, and I want to eat something sweet and bad for me. Do you like pie?"
Sure.
Jimmy couldn't help but smile at her. Whatever Rose wanted to do today, he was here to help. Jimmy stood awkwardly in the middle of Rose's living room. He rocked back and forth, hands shoved deep into his pockets as if he was afraid to touch anything. "Hey, I'm really sorry about this." Rose stepped back into the living room. She gestured at the piles that dominated the room. She knew it looked like nothing had been thrown away in years. Nothing had. She pressed her palms against the thrift store jeans. She hadn't owned any for years. She was much more comfortable in the pants and a sweater. Her feet were finally warm and toasty in her favorite thick socks and boots. My father was a classic hoarder. I wasn't allowed to throw anything away. It got worse this past year. I never realized it was a symptom of a more serious illness. And I should apologize for kissing you like that. I let my enthusiasm run amok.
No apologies. You can run amok with me anytime. I am a bit confused. Shouldn't you be sad, in mourning? You did just bury your father.
Rose shook her head. Her neck moved like a wobble-headed doll, now that she wasn't wrestling with the weight of all of her hair. The tension in her shoulders released from invisible burdens. I buried my abuser today. Today I am free. I don't know what's next, but he cannot manipulate me anymore. He cannot keep me from living anymore. Rose's heart thumped hard when Jimmy sidled up to her and pulled her into his embrace.
So that means you want pie.
She rested her hands against his chest. It felt firm and muscular through the thin fabric of his shirt. I want to live, James. And that means being able to have pie whenever I choose. That means being able to kiss a man because I can. It means being able to cut my hair because it's my hair on my head. He is probably spinning in his grave because I've cut it off. I'm in pants, and I'm alone in the house with you contemplating how to throw out all this crap. Jimmy nuzzled against her ear.
You never brought any of your boyfriends home when the old man was out of town.
Jimmy's lips tickled. A soft moan escaped her lips. Jimmy's tongue was doing evil things to her ear. His lips on her neck made her want his lips everywhere. He never went anywhere. And I wasn't allowed boyfriends, she said softly. You're the first boy I've ever kissed. Jimmy stopped kissing her. The temperature dropped as he stepped away.
Oh hell, you're a...
He paused, running his hand over his face. I'm a what? Say it, she taunted. He couldn't call her anything worse than what she really was. A sorry sad case, a shut-in, an ugly old maid?
A virgin,
Jimmy stated. Yep, that too. A virgin. Is that so bad? The sting of tears rimmed her eyes. She blinked the sensations away. If her dead father ruined her shot with Jimmy, well, she couldn't kill the old bastard, could she? Jimmy stared at her. She stared back, pleading with her eyes for him to hold her. A tear slipped free when he finally wrapped his arms around her again.
No, Rose, it's not so bad. It means I need to cool my jets a whole lot.
Rose cried into Jimmy's chest. She cried out all of the frustration of allowing her father to control her for years, all of the grief she actually did feel over his loss, all of the uncertainty for her future. Rose blinked awake, darkness surrounded her. She was warm under a blanket and snuggled against Jimmy. She didn't remember him moving them to the couch or wrapping a quilt around them. The air in the living room was sharp, cold. She needed to turn on the heater. Jimmy's head listed to the side. He snored gently. Apparently, her emotional outpouring had exhausted him as well. She burrowed back into his embrace. This was nice. Why had her father been so set against her having this? Not that she knew what this was. But being in Jimmy's arms was nice. Jimmy snorted, gasped, and lifted his head. He looked at her bleary-eyed.
Did I fall asleep?
Rose nodded. I have no idea what time it is. Jimmy checked his watch.
Dinner time. Do you still want pie? There's a great diner between here and Tahoe.
That sounds good. Rose stood and stretched with a yawn. She followed the path between mounds of detritus into the kitchen, pushed a stack from the kitchen counter onto the floor, adding to the existing piles, lifted up on her arms, hiked up a knee, and then stood on the counter. She opened one of the top cupboards and flailed around inside. Father hid money up here all the time. Got it. With a large round tin in her hands, she sat on the counter and pried the lid open. Instead of the promised butter cookies on the label, it held a small stack of dollar bills. Let's see just how much he left me before I starve. She began counting. Her jaw clenched as she realized that comment was a little closer to reality than intended. As far as she knew, this was the only cash her father ever kept in the house. He'd probably forgotten about it last year, before he had gotten so bad. She hadn't heard him clamoring onto the counter to hide it in a long time.
Don't you have a savings or anything?
Jimmy asked. Rose shook her head. The house is paid off, so I should be okay there. Even with father only getting disability for the last few years, he wouldn't let me work. I'll have to figure out how to get a job. She gestured to the piles. He would have fits and things would get moved around, bookshelves emptied. I was never allowed to touch anything. Maybe there's something of value underneath all this that I can sell. Not the car though. I want to learn how to drive. Kind of hard to get around without one. Rose folded a few of the bills and put them into her pocket. She didn't want to think about everything she needed to do. For now, she wanted to focus on getting a piece of pie and maybe getting Jimmy to kiss her again. She closed the lid to the tin and looked up at Jimmy. Shall we? The diner was bright with neon colors. Chrome features reflected color like all of the Christmas lights that were already coming down around town. 3 kinds of pie were arranged between Rose and Jimmy. Rose waved her fork around, conducting along with the music playing on the jukebox. Jimmy stared at her. Her father had died, and she was sucking in everything good about life she could. Anyone else would be wrapped in doom and gloom. She found her old man dead in his recliner the day after Christmas, which would have put a damper on anyone's holiday. But from the look of her house, she hadn't had much of a celebration anyway.
You told me your father was your abuser. Did he hit you?
Jimmy finally got up the nerve to ask. He was emotionally abusive. First of all, you've seen the conditions I was forced to live in. That is disgusting. I had to clean that. She gestured air quotes around the word clean. I had to dust the piles. Rose took a bite of the cream pie. She closed her eyes as she clearly savored the flavors in her mouth. Jimmy's body reacted to her satisfied grin. Blood left his brain as he thought about what he would give to put an expression like that on her face. He'd gotten so bad towards the end, he would yell at me for switching something from one pile to another. As she described her life, blood returned to his brain, allowing him to ask questions.
How did you realize this wasn't normal, that he was abusive? I thought that a lot of victims think that's just the way things are. They don't realize they are being abused. I can't imagine he would let you watch Oprah or Dr. Phil, where they would talk about all of that.
It wasn't always like that, but it was just us. I had to take care of him after Mother died. He watched TV all the time, but I wasn't allowed to. It got worse after he joined the Brotherhood of Jesus. After that, I wasn't allowed to read certain books, and I couldn't wear pants. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone he didn't know. I couldn't go to the grocery store alone, unless he was sick.
Is that the super fundamentalist cult church? You're not.
Jimmy cut himself off.
How did you get around? What were you allowed to do? I mean, well, you seem pretty darn spirited and not terribly beat down.
He observed. According to Rose, her father had kept her subjugated and hidden from the world. She seemed to fly even though she was sitting. I walked a lot. Father had arranged for someone from the church to give me a ride into town once a week. I could shop and go to the library. I was allowed to work at the church, and you know what happens when you volunteer to do office work? Rose leaned forward on the table, fork full of cherry pie gripped tight in her hand. They teach you how to use the computer. Librarians know how to help you answer questions. So I started looking up the hoarding thing. I didn't even know that's what it was called. I just knew it was gross, and I wanted to see if there was a way to convince him to let me toss it.
Why did you stay, Rose? Why didn't you run?
She sighed. I thought about it. I thought about running away a lot. I came close more than once, but I was scared. Then the more I learned, the more I figured he couldn't help it. You don't run away from someone who is sick. He was sick. She shoved the fork in her mouth and continued talking around the mouthful of pie. It's a mental illness. Jimmy couldn't help but smile. Her world had suddenly changed, and clearly for the better. He had never met anyone so hungry to live. Jimmy didn't have a clear goal for his own life. He always tried to be useful. He had a handful of odd jobs because he could help out. And now here was Rose, embracing all of the life she had been denied. He definitely wanted to help her meet her dreams. He wanted to be a part of them.
What does day 2 of your to-do list include?
I have to find out about getting a dumpster so I can start cleaning out the house. That's going to be a lot of work.
Won't people from your church help out?
Rose shook her head side to side, a look of disgust twisting her face. I'm not a member, and I don't want to have anything to do with those people now that I don't have to. I should probably call Mr. Stassen too.
The lawyer with the fancy building downtown.
Rose nodded. I need to find out if there is any money and how I do basic stuff, like pay bills. I'm hoping my father gave him my birth certificate, or that he might know where to look, or how I get a copy. I'm going to need that to get a driver's license and a job, right? For someone who had been cut off from the world, she seemed to be aware of what she needed. He wasn't sure he would be so tuned into the responsibilities of functional adulthood if he had been in her shoes. Rose was coming out of a forced seclusion, and already knew more of the world than he ever had, and he'd been living on his own since he graduated high school and his mom started charging him rent. Rose may have it figured out, but he still wanted to be there.
I can come over and help you clean in the morning if you'd like, but I gotta work tomorrow night.
You got an evening funeral to drive for? Rose asked. He grinned, unsure how much to reveal.
Nah, that's only one of my jobs. I work at a club up in Tahoe one weekend a month. You like dance music? You should come with me. You can hang out while I do my thing. It will definitely introduce you to the wilder side of life.
Rose beamed. Really?
You think you can handle it?
She laughed as she nodded. Yeah, she was grabbing life by the horns. Jimmy definitely wanted to be along for this ride. Rose leaned into the mirror. Putting on makeup was a lot harder than Sally at the salon had made it look. Rose bugged her eyes as wide as she could, and carefully swiped the fuzzy bristles of the mascara up and out, coating her lashes. She counted to 30, with her eyes as wide as possible. She needed to blink, but Sally had said no blinking for at least 30 seconds to let the mascara dry. She let out a ragged sigh. One eye done. The crackling rattle of car tires on the gravel drive demanded her attention. Jimmy had mentioned he would come over to help. A flutter of excitement took her breath. She tried to focus on finishing her makeup quickly, wanting to look good for him. She was both surprised and flattered he hadn't changed his mind. He seemed to have grown up into a genuinely nice man. Excited, she stuffed the mascara back into the tube to do the other eye. A shuffle and a crash thundered through the house as a pile in the living room collapsed. Rose froze with the mascara wand less than an inch from her lashes. She took a deep breath before she continued sweeping the makeup on. He must have let himself in.
This place is a sty, Brother Carter. How will we ever clean up this filth?
Rose blinked. That most certainly was not Jimmy's voice. And now there was a black smudge of mascara under her eye. She didn't recognize the female voice, but Brother Carter was the head deacon from the Brotherhood. "Excuse me?" Rose called out as she entered the living room. "What are you doing? Can I help you?"
Who are you?
Mrs. Cuthbert, one of the busybodies from the church, asked. The woman never had time for anything but sticking her nose where it wasn't needed. "I'm Rose St. John and this is my house. Is there something you need? You should have knocked. As you can see, the living room isn't in any condition for guests." While inside she felt like yelling and screaming, letting the new Rose loose, she remained cordial and mannerly.
Ah, Rose, I didn't recognize you. You have changed so much since the last time I saw you.
"I've cut my hair since the funeral," she responded flatly. Mrs. Cuthbert knew damn well who she was. This was one of those annoying games the woman played whenever Rose volunteered at the church office to trick her into doing the old bat's work.
This will just not do. Your daddy gave this house to the church. I can see why now, seeing how you've taken care of it.
Mrs. Cuthbert huffed. "What do you mean he gave the house to the church?"
"Rosie dear?"
Brother Carter took her hand. Bile burned the back of her throat, but she tried to remain polite. She had never liked Brother Carter. He seemed dishonest and slimy.
"We take possession of the property with the new year. I'm sure I can work it out with the elders to allow you a few weeks to gather your things and find other accommodations. I am only too happy to help you out."
When the old man started stroking the back of her hand, she snatched it free of his grip. She stared at him, incredulous. "You must be wrong."
Oh no, Rose, he gave the house to the Brotherhood. It was in his papers,
Mrs. Cuthbert said with a sneer in her tone. Of course, her father gave the house to his church. He took care of everything, just not her. Why on earth had Rose thought things would be any different after his death? She closed her eyes against the pain. Pain she should have seen coming. "Go away." Rose's voice quavered. "Get out. This is my house. Get out of my house." She screamed and kept screaming until Brother Carter and Mrs. Cuthbert rushed out the door, jumped in Mrs. Cuthbert's paneled station wagon and sped back down the driveway. The next time tires crunched on her unpaved driveway, Rose ran to the front window and peeked through the curtain. Nerves danced in her stomach. Was it Jimmy? Because if it was Brother Carter again, she was calling the police. But when she didn't see the Mustang, the nerves stopped dancing. A large gray luxury vehicle slowed to a stop in front of the house. Jimmy's car rumbled in behind it. Rose's nerves began dancing again. Mr. Stawson, silver-haired and in an expensive suit, exited the big car. It was a striking visual contrast to Jimmy in a hoodie and tight jeans, getting out of his beat-up old Mustang. Rose hadn't expected the lawyer to actually come over today. The receptionist at his office had said he would return her call, not show up on her doorstep. Maybe she needed to sign papers. He knew she didn't drive. "Hello, Mr. Stawson. This is a surprise. Won't you come in?" Excuse the mess, my father wasn't well. She smiled politely at him as he passed her into the house. Jimmy kissed her lightly on the cheek in greeting and followed the lawyer into the overcrowded living room.
Bad timing?
She shrugged before closing the door behind him. Stassen looked around.
Rose, I had no idea it had gotten this bad.
It's been getting worse the past few years. But, she added with a sigh, now I can start cleaning up and taking care of things properly. Stassen shuffled in place. Awkwardly, he opened his briefcase while standing in the middle of the living room.
You might not want to do anything, Rose. We have a situation.
I know. Brother Carter came by and said father gave the house to the BOJ. How could he do that? He wasn't well.
Maybe you two should sit down.
Jimmy stepped into the kitchen and quickly cleared off the table with a broad swipe of his arm. He dumped the contents of one chair onto one of the piles. Stassen mumbled a thank you as he eased into the cleaned-off chair. Jimmy stood behind Rose as she sat, placing a hand on her shoulder. The lawyer laid a thick bound document in front of Rose, and she stared at it. Stassen cleared his throat.
You see, Miss St. John, I received a call from the BOJ.
Rose grabbed for Jimmy's hand. Mr. Stassen was not calling her Rose. This was not good.
I went over your father's will again this morning, and it seems he expected that you would already be taken care of. I gather he thought you to be married by now.
Rose gulped, she felt lightheaded. What? How could I be married? He never let me talk to anyone. Did he make arrangements and forget to tell me? Her voice turned shrill as panic set in. She clenched Jimmy's hand tightly. The lawyer flipped calmly through the pages of the document until he reached an official-looking form.
Because of your situation, according to the will, the Brotherhood of Jesus is to get, and I am sorry, all properties, including vehicles and bank accounts.
Rose stared blankly at the man. Was she even breathing? If her father had ever cared for her, ever thought about her, it was clear that part of him had died years before his body had. She had been so relieved at his death, so eager to move on with her life, that she hadn't for a moment considered she wouldn't even have somewhere to live. Where am I supposed to live? Her fortitude deserted her as she collapsed in tears. He had managed to destroy her life even after his death. She wasn't free of him. She would never be free. Jimmy leaned over Rose.
We'll figure something out,
He said softly as he stroked her heaving back.
Mr. Stassen. There has got to be something in that will for Rose. What did you mean by her situation?
The man nodded.
I'm referring to Rose not being married. All properties would have been handed to her husband. Her mother's collections are hers. There was a figurine set specifically mentioned, and some musical instruments.
He flipped through the document.
Flutes and other woodwinds. But who knows how long it will take to find them.
He gestured at the hoarding mess.
There is one thing, but it's so far-fetched, and well, it has to be done in the next 24 hours.
Rose lifted her head and blinked through tears at the lawyer.
The will stipulates that if you are unmarried when your father dies, you have until the end of the same calendar year to marry. At which point your husband becomes the sole benefactor. With exception of your mother's collections. Those are to remain yours.
Rose gasped in disbelief. She stared at the lawyer in numb shock. My husband gets everything? Not me. I don't have a husband.
It's December 30th, Mr. Stassen. Surely her father made some kind of contingency for that.
Jimmy asked. Stassen ran his hand through his hair.
I'm sorry, he was very clear.
Well, all right. We can get married this afternoon.
Jimmy stated. Rose turned and blinked up at him. The nausea caught in her throat settled. Jimmy, I can't ask you to do that.
Son, are you trying to rip this young lady off?
The lawyer sounded stern, ready to protect Rose. But it was the church and her father ripping her off, not Jimmy. Mr. Stassen hadn't exactly offered other suggestions. If they didn't do something, she would be homeless and helpless. Her father had clearly seen to that. Jimmy scoffed, telling the lawyer exactly what was in Rose's head.
You're telling her she has to give up her home, and you're asking me if I'm ripping her off.
Jimmy squatted down in front of her, staring into her eyes.
Look, it's the only way so you don't lose everything. You think the BOJ is going to let you take the time to sort through all this crap to find your shit?
Rose shrugged.
No, Rose, they aren't. It's the same group of people who left you to walk home in the snow from the funeral. They're going to want to empty this place out and sell it fast.
Jimmy turned to Mr. Stawson. The old man rubbed his chin, a thoughtful expression crossed his face.
You'll have to drive into Nevada to get it done in time.
Fine, we can do that.
Jimmy agreed. What? Rose looked from the lawyer to Jimmy, her mouth open in shock.
Come on, Rose. We'll be right there anyway since we planned on going to Tahoe tonight. We can leave early or, instead of coming back here, we'll head on over to the Nevada side, get a room, and get married in the morning.
Isn't there another way? She turned to the lawyer, waving at the papers. How would such a ridiculous legal document stand? How was this happening to her in this day and age? She dreamed all her life of finally getting to be a free woman, and now to keep her home, she would have to marry? Stawson shook his head.
You should have a few years to contest this, but the BOJ isn't going to sit around and wait for that to happen. Legal or not, they will move on the property as soon as they can. They aren't popular around here for many reasons. They have done this before, get a clause like this in your father's will, and pull the rug out from under the grieving family, leaving them with nothing.
It's not how I thought I'd get married either. And it's not like we have to stay married. Right?
Jimmy stood, shifting his attention back to Mr. Stawson.
You'll have to stay married through probate. I don't know how long that will take. It could be anywhere from months to years if this is contested.
How soon would Rose be able to have access to any assets? Like money. She's going to need something to live on.
Rose watched the conversation between the two men, shifting her attention back and forth. Her future was once again in the hands of someone other than herself. She felt numb. At least this time they both seemed to be making sure she was cared for.
Accounts will be locked up in probate. Rose won't have access for quite some time. My office can issue a loan against the available balance that will be on hold.
Jimmy crouched down in front of Rose again.
I'll sign a promissory note that I'll turn everything over to you as soon as legally possible. Rose, it's the only way to save your house and your inheritance.
Jimmy held her gaze for a few tense seconds. He stood, grabbed her hand, and pulled her outside into the frozen air on the front porch.
There isn't much room to do this in there.
Jimmy sank to one knee.
Marry me, Rose. Let me help you.
Rose grinned down at him, grateful for his kind-hearted gesture. You're giving me a proper proposal on one knee, and everything. Yes. She sighed and held onto his hand. Mr. Stawson stood, framed in the doorway.
Congratulations. I'll get the appropriate documents in order. Call me once you're married. I will need that certificate as soon as possible. And it must have this year's date on it to avoid any problems from the BOJ.
Rose leaned against Jimmy's arm as they watched the lawyer pull out of her driveway.
You handled that quite well.
Jimmy spoke softly. I was a blubbery mess. She tried to laugh it off, but Jimmy was right. Everything had imploded around her, and she hadn't reacted at all. She couldn't react. She didn't know how to fight any of this.
Yeah, but you held it together. You didn't throw things or scream. And you certainly had every right to.
He ran a thumb across her cheek. To Rose it felt like he smeared fire because his touch burned.
Your makeup is all smeared.
I know. She sighed and sank down onto a slumping bad posture. I don't know how to get it off.
Come on, I'll show you.
Jimmy squeezed past her to avoid knocking over anything, and guided her back into the bathroom. Rose watched him rummage through the medicine cabinet and under the sink. He straightened triumphantly with a large jar of petroleum jelly. Wrapping an arm around her waist, he leaned against the sink and tugged her into his personal space.
Look up.
His thighs pressed against hers as he settled her between his legs. His chest lifted against her as he breathed. He smelled of mint gum. She had been next to him before, but not intertwined like this. Her stomach flipped. Gently, Jimmy wiped a tissue of ointment under her eyes, then even more gently he began stroking the makeup from her cheeks.
There.
He announced when he finished. He didn't adjust position. Neither did Rose. She stared up at Jimmy into the depths of his eyes. At some point, his hands fell to her hips, pulling her closer. Rose didn't want Jimmy to stop reeling her in. She continued until their lips pressed together. She forgot everything as the warmth of his mouth played against hers. Her fingers grasped the fabric of his shirt. Jimmy cupped the back of her head and slid his tongue against her lips. She parted them and tasted him. All she knew was her mouth wanted his, and her hands wanted to be on his body. She pressed into him. His firm chest flattened her breasts while her belly brushed against a firmer bulge in his jeans. Rose tensed and scrambled out of his embrace at the realization that he had gotten turned on, and she had rubbed against him, against it. She blushed and stammered. So you came over to help me clean?" The bathroom was suddenly too small for the two of them. Rose tripped over Jimmy's leg, escaping from its confines and her own arousal.
Rose?
Jimmy followed her out into the living room. "I need to get all of this cleaned." Her voice was barely above a whisper.
I see.
Jimmy sighed.
I brought garbage bags like you asked. We should be able to get some work done before it's time to head out. I have to be at the club by 7.
"I guess we had better get started." Rose began picking up papers from one of the piles, unable to look Jimmy in the eye.
So what's the plan?
He asked. Rose relaxed. He wasn't going to make her talk about it. Oh God, she was calling it it. He had an erection, and she was all nerves. She swallowed, trying to get moisture into her dry throat. "I want to clean up the front part of the house before I do the other rooms. My bedroom is fine, my father's not so much. And then there is the room I can barely open the door to." She gestured at all the piles, still avoiding his eyes. "I can keep the doors to those closed for now, but this needs to be taken care of."
Are we sorting or shoveling?
Sorting. Somewhere in all of this are my mother's collections. The top layer is all garbage, but a few years back Father emptied the attic. I think all of that is in here somewhere. Rose talked through her mental to-do list, such as getting a dumpster.
Why don't you make your calls, and I'll go get some sandwiches for lunch. Okay.
Rose nodded. Her nerves still jangled from the confrontation with Brother Carter, the bad news from the lawyer and Jimmy's lips, as well as that other part of him. He was going to marry her. He would probably expect her to deal with that other part of his anatomy. She wanted to, but she didn't know if she was ready yet. She was just getting used to the idea of kissing him. His car rumbled out of the driveway. Rose stood in the middle of her living room, surrounded by stratified layers of garbage, papers, random clothing, bits of broken stuff. She wasn't planning on losing any of it to the BOJ. Jimmy was helping her make sure of that. Panic that she was going to be homeless washed over her, despite Jimmy's assurances. Slowly she turned in a circle, staring at piles of junk. A path through the stacks led into the back of the house. Her father's recliner was cleared off, as was half the couch. The living room looked more like a landfill, with garbage piled everywhere. Step 1: get that dumpster. She picked up the phone and realized she didn't know who to call. If there was a phone book in here, she would never find it. What did she do when she had questions she couldn't answer?
"Need County Library, this is Miss Clark,"
a friendly voice said over the phone. The librarian helped Rose locate a number for the county waste management. Rental of a dumpster was more complicated than Rose anticipated. She was going to need to get the biggest dumpster they offered, and she didn't have that kind of money. She released a heavy sigh. Time to find out about how much her father had and snag a loan from the lawyer. Jimmy, this is a strip club," Rose announced as they got out of the car. She pulled her coat closer. She looked from the neon sign of kicking legs to Jimmy. Confusion crossed her brow. She didn't think she was going to be very comfortable hanging out here.
Yep, and the last weekend of every month is ladies' night.
Jimmy pulled a large duffel from the trunk. So you bartend on ladies' nights? Rose asked hopefully. She didn't want to entertain any other possibilities.
Come on.
Jimmy nodded his head toward the club, giving her a sly smile. Rose followed him into a dark enclosed space. A runway stage with a pole at the end glowed under lights. Jimmy led Rose to a stool at the end of the bar that ran the length of the back wall. A busty woman approached them from the other side of the bar.
Sup, Jimmy?
Claudette, meet Rose.
Rose reached across and shook Claudette's hand.
I need you to take real good care of Rose for me. Everything she orders is on my tab.
Sure thing.
Claudette turned to Rose.
You his new girl?
Jimmy stepped so close his heat radiated against her back. The arm he threw over her shoulder felt protective. She wanted to lean into him, let him keep her safe. Instead she sat ramrod straight, too nervous to move at all.
Rose and I are getting married in the morning.
Startled, Rose looked up into Jimmy's face. He beamed with pride. It radiated off him. Sex, it had to be. He was excited because they were going to have sex. Rose's stomach flipped. She felt like a nervous bride. She was a nervous bride. Never been kissed until yesterday, and now she was going to get married and have to do all the married things. Why was this so hard? If she thought about it, she became a mess. If she didn't think and he kissed her, her body got soft and happy, and she wanted to touch his skin. He got all hard. Her throat dried up, as the reality of Jimmy's anatomy flooded back into her brain.
Wow, congratulations. That's?
Claudette paused. Rose could tell that she searched for a word that wouldn't be offensive. Unexpected. But we decided not to wait. No time like the present, right? Rose replied, her voice brittle and fake. Claudette nodded.
Whatever you say. Let me know if you want something.
Oh God, she thinks I'm pregnant. Thanks, Rose said, her voice returning to normal.
You hang out here.
Jimmy told her.
I need to head back. Stay here until after the show so I can find you.
He kissed her on the cheek, picked up his pack and strode toward the opposite side of the stage. Jimmy. Rose ran after him. What do you mean stay here? Aren't you bartending? Jimmy shook his head.
Claudette's the bartender. I'm part of the show.
Rose's mouth opened into a silent O, and her eyes bugged out. She blinked a few times. She was about to see Jimmy naked, a whole lot sooner than she'd expected. You're a stripper, she finally managed. Nerves along her upper arms tingled strangely. The skin across her shoulders tried to migrate to the back of her neck. She felt a tick pulse under her eye. She had to stop freaking out about this. Jimmy chuckled.
Exotic male dancer, but only on the last weekend of the month. Don't worry, you won't see anything you aren't ready to see.
He winked before he disappeared behind the curtain and into the backstage area. Rose's stomach did an uncomfortable flip. The curtain swung shut behind Jimmy. What the hell was he doing? He'd started off wanting to help Rose out, and now this had gotten serious fast. Too fast. He decided at the diner that he was all in, but he hadn't realized that included getting married right away. He grinned. He would have gotten there eventually, maybe in a year or two, just not tomorrow. He opened the door to the dressing room. The combined smell of stale cigarettes, alcohol, sweat, and too much cheap perfume assaulted his nasal passages.
Hey Jimbo.
Several of the other performers called.
Okay guys.
Jimmy planted his feet inside the entrance to the room.
The girl in the back corner of the bar is hands off.
Why's she your date? Is she loaded and you want all the tips? Yeah, what gives?
Jimmy cleared his throat.
That's my wife, and I don't want you trolls freaking her out with your smelly asses.
Dude, you got married?
A hand smacked Jimmy across the back of his shoulders.
Congratulations.
I am in the morning.
Jimmy clarified.
So she's fair game.
One of the men said with a laugh. Jimmy growled, not surprised by his own protective reaction.
Only if you want to go home without any balls. Like I said, off limits. She's kind of nervous about being here, so play nice.
Chill out, man. No one is going to hump all over your woman but you. You had better give her one hell of a lap dance, though. Just saying.
Jimmy sighed. He wanted to give Rose all of the lap dances. She was going to become his wife, and they hadn't even properly started dating. He didn't want to scare her, but he did want to give her all of his attention. But he still needed to show off for the other women in the club. He was paid in tips, and he needed the income, especially now he was going to be a married man. Rose huddled in the corner drinking iced tea and eating nachos. Droves of women noisily filled the bar without a man in sight. They were screaming and hollering before the show even began. When the house lights dropped to signal the beginning of the show, the noise level increased. Rose's eyes bugged out when she watched three buff, half-naked men in tight blue jeans strut onto the catwalk. The first one spun around the stripper pole. Women lined the stage and threw money at the dancers. Holy cow, if Jimmy was one of those. She blushed deeply as she realized how buff Jimmy had to be. He had kissed her, and she was going to marry him. It was a marriage of convenience, but, dang, if she wasn't interested in making it completely legal, consummated and all. Her blush roared back across her face as she thought about sex. Her flush grew hotter the second she spotted Jimmy on stage. When his shirt flew off, the women in the audience screamed with hoots and laughter. Rose sucked in her breath. She had rested against those shoulders. Those mile-wide shoulders. On the third dance number, the dancers jumped off the stage to the main floor. Rose hid her eyes behind her hand, as the dancers began bumping and grinding on the women in the audience. It was all too raw for her. Driven by curiosity, she peeked and saw the dancers strutting around with money sticking out of their G-strings. Not wanting any of the embarrassing bump and grind attention, she avoided looking at any of the men whenever they strutted near. She breathed a sigh of relief as each one of them passed her by. The lights dimmed, and the men disappeared behind the backstage curtain. Another stage number. This time Jimmy and another man took turns showing off their upper body strength on the stripper pole. They spun and did stunts on the pole. The other dancer had more grace and skill as he twirled around the pole, but Jimmy was far better looking. The men hit the main floor again and again. Rose diverted her eyes. She risked furtive glances but was too embarrassed to watch. A warm presence against her arm brought her attention away from her nachos. She caught a glimpse of skin and turned away. She attempted to hide by making the dancer think she was more interested in eating than watching him. She could feel the air shift as the dancer moved around her. "Oh no, I don't want," she protested as she turned to look the man in the eye. She froze. Jimmy smiled at her. She couldn't break eye contact with him. She could sense his body move around hers, but she couldn't take her eyes from his face. When he grabbed her hand and rubbed it over his chest, she closed her eyes. His skin was hot and slick with sweat. She didn't want to think. She only wanted to feel, to enjoy him under her fingers. If she thought too much, she would panic. She was too aware there were people in the bar who could see them touching. Oh God, people could see them. All of her muscles tensed up and her eyes flew open. Dropping her hand, Jimmy winked at her before he spun away to cavort for another woman. Waving a napkin in front of her hot face, she remained on her stool and stared at her nachos while she listened to the music and the shrill screams of the women around her. Her eyes never wandered too far from her food, or from looking at all the different liquor bottles along the back wall of the bar. "Can I have another one of these?" she asked the bartender as she held up her tall narrow tea glass. It was a different woman than Claudette.
Long Island?
She asked. "Iced tea," Rose corrected. The refill tasted a little sweeter than she was used to, but it went well with the nachos. She continued to focus on the food even after the music ended, and the audience slowly filtered out of the club. She wasn't sure how long it had been, or how many nachos she had ordered. Rose found it hard to keep her balance on the stool. The bar swam in her vision. She closed her eyes and waited for Jimmy.
Rose, you ready?
Jimmy gently touched her on the shoulder. She looked pale, terrified. Maybe bringing her here tonight hadn't been the best idea he'd ever had. When she tried to stand, her legs collapsed out from under her. Jimmy caught her in his strong arms. "You're really handsome." Rose's words slurred together. "We're gonna get married."
Yes, we are.
Jimmy tried to stabilize her, but she melted against his chest. "You're a stripper," she garbled. "I'm gonna marry a stripper and have sex." "Not tonight, you aren't."
And you're intoxicated. What the hell have you been drinking?
Jimmy asked. "Iced tea." It sounded more like ice too. Jimmy picked up her glass and sniffed.
Crap. Claudette, what have you been giving her?
She's just been drinking tea all night. And eating nachos, may I point out, not watching your show.
Claudette said as she sauntered over. He handed the glass to Claudette.
Does that taste like tea to you?
Claudette barked out a laugh.
I guess Lydia thought she was drinking Long Island iced teas.
Not funny. I don't think she's ever had alcohol before, and now she's drunk off her ass.
Jimmy looked down at Rose's sweet face. She was crushed into his chest. Her mouth gaped open and she made soft snoring noises.
And asleep. Great.
Jimmy hefted his duffel over one shoulder, before bending to lift Rose into his arms.
I'm supposed to carry you over the threshold after we're married, not before,
he said as he carried her out to his car.
I promise I'll carry you over your threshold tomorrow, when you'll remember it.
She replied with a snort and a loud snore. Rose balanced with one hand pressed against her forehead, and the other reaching for the counter. Her head throbbed. She couldn't remember anything past a certain point last night. She remembered the show, and Jimmy's naked torso. She remembered wanting to touch him, and have him touch her. She remembered panicking. The officiant in the quickie wedding chapel droned on about some nonsense regarding the sanctity of marriage. Whatever. She wanted the noise to stop. He asked her a question, she said yes. He prompted her to a more particular response. She said what she was directed to say. Jimmy's soft lips brushed against hers. Had he kissed her last night? Had his lips been soft or seeking? She was afraid of what she might have done. Her body hated her this morning. Did her stomach hurt because she was nervous? Sick? Hung over? Or were those cramps from sex? She couldn't remember anything after the show, and was too nervous to look at him. Too terrified to ask. A pen was pushed into her hand, and she signed her name. More noise, more jostling. Jimmy whispered, "You okay?" No, she was not okay. "Please just make it all stop," Rose managed to groan. She had never felt this sick in her life. Even the air hurt her hair. She was hungover, getting married, and completely unable to remember if she had thrown herself at her new husband last night. It was not a pleasant combination. "Can I go to bed now?" Rose whined. Sleep would make the dull throbbing pain stop. "You can sleep in the car. I need to get this marriage certificate over to Mr. Stassen and take you home," Jimmy answered in low, soothing tones. His car wasn't soothing. The rumbling of the engine beat her up, until she managed to fall asleep again. With the wedding papers in hand, Mr. Stassen declared Jimmy the heir to her father's fortune, and promptly issued Rose a partial loan against the balance in her father's bank account. It took less than a week for her to have access to the funds and order a dumpster.
I found another figurine.
Jimmy called out from the living room. He turned the figure around in his hand. Another guy playing a flute, probably the Pied Piper of Hamelin, based on the line of children dancing after the man with the instrument. Rose rushed from the second bedroom, setting a long narrow box down as she entered the room. "Really?"
Yeah, it's a nice one too. Look.
Jimmy held up the porcelain figure for Rose to examine. "I wonder how many there are." Rose carried it over to the mantel to place next to the other pieces they had already found.
I get the connection between the figures playing flutes, like the drum and fife one, that pan, and this new one. But I don't get the airplane.
It's a Piper Cub. They are all Pipers of some kind or another. That was my mother's nickname. Piper. Jimmy nodded.
Oh,
Look, I found another recorder. She opened the box to show him. Jimmy picked up the instrument.
this one makes 9 total, flutes, piccolos and recorders. Your mom must have played a lot.
I don't remember her playing anything, but she made me take lessons.
You play.
He dusted his palms on the back of his jeans.
Play something.
Rose rolled her eyes. Oh God, no. You'll run screaming and never come back. She laughed. Jimmy stood solemnly, holding the recorder out to Rose.
Please. I'm not going anywhere.
Rose grimaced as she removed the instrument from his hands. In shape, it was a basic recorder, except this one was not clear red plastic like the one he had been tortured with in the 5th grade. This instrument glowed with the rich golden color of the wood it had been carved from. He winced as Rose blew an ear-splitting note. Sorry, she muttered and repositioned her fingers. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and placed her lips around the mouthpiece. A clear, pure note emanated from the recorder. Jimmy's body reacted to everything. His ears welcomed the rich tones of the music. His body began to sway to Rose's choice of the snake charmer. He tried to ignore his growing desire and let the music enchant him into an impromptu performance of undulations and sinuous movements. He crossed his legs and pivoted, wrapping his arms and circling his wrists in snake-like motions. One of his feet slipped out from under him. He staggered before awkwardly regaining his feet. Damn it. Rose stopped playing. You okay?
Yeah, there's still so much crap on the floor.
Jimmy kicked around to see what had unexpectedly ended his performance. It looked like petals of some kind.
Check this out.
Jimmy kneeled down and brushed at a crushed pile of twigs and dead leaves. Rose sighed. More dead plants. I guess those are from around when my mom died. I can't remember any plants in the house after that.
But look.
Jimmy pointed at a few desiccated blossoms.
They were roses. I thought you said your dad hated roses.
He couldn't stand them.
Most of the flowers we're finding at this level are all roses. They were your mother's favorite, weren't they?
He lifted his eyes to her. Rose's shrug let him know she'd never made that connection. No wonder he hated me.
I don't think your dad hated you. It's like we hit an important layer of history here. The flowers, and I'm finding more of the figures and your mother's flutes. When did your mother die?
I was in the 8th grade.
Look at the date on this.
Jimmy handed her a yellowed, brittle newspaper. Same year. Rose glanced across the living room. You're right. This must be when all of this mess started, with Mother's death. I guess he couldn't handle it.
How did you?
He asked. Honestly? I didn't. I was shuffled off to relatives that summer. When I came back, I was in survival mode. I think I've been in survival mode ever since. Rose kneeled beside Jimmy on the floor. They had successfully cleaned a large section of the living room. Day by day, they recovered more space in the house.
Losing her must have broken him.
He said softly. Rose sighed. I didn't survive my mother's death. She left me with him. He was so angry. I was never allowed to visit her in the hospital. I had no idea my father wasn't coping. I was mad at her. I don't know if I was following his lead, or if I had my own emotions. After she died, I thought he hated me. I didn't have time to miss her. I was too busy trying to be good, trying to avoid his wrath. He would always tell me how much he hated roses. I figured that included me too. Tears fell from her eyes. Jimmy reached over and wiped one away with the pad of his thumb. Rose collapsed in a heap. Her favorite flowers were roses. I never got to say goodbye. I was just mad all the time. And now Father is dead and I'm all alone. She sobbed and gulped for air. Jimmy wrapped his arms around her, making soothing noises.
You aren't alone, Rose. You have me now.
He reminded her. But this isn't real, Jimmy, she cried against his chest.
Don't say that. This is as real as it needs to be. It's as real as you want.
He stood, pulling Rose to her feet. He scooped her up and waded through the rest of the living room, carrying her back to her bedroom. Rose cried into his chest. Jimmy lowered her to her bed and lay down next to her. This fragile woman had endured so much. He stroked her hair as she continued to cry over the loss of her mother, possibly for the first time. And for the loss of her father, who she'd really lost when her mother died. Once her breathing steadied, he continued to hold her until she fell asleep. This was real for him. She already had a firm hold on his heart. It would just take time to woo her. A loud banging rattled the front door. Jimmy sighed with aggravation and rolled out of the small bed. He stomped through the house and opened the door to find Mrs. Cuthbert on the porch, her face so pinched it looked like she was constantly smelling something bad.
Where is Miss St. John?
Mrs. Cuthbert demanded.
My wife is resting. She's had an emotional morning. Why are you here?
Jimmy asked.
I just came here to tell her that we know what you two are up to, and this house will never be hers.
Mrs. Cuthbert spit her words at Jimmy.
You haven't even moved in here properly, like a husband should.
I don't have to explain myself to you. But for your information, I am moving in here. We got married in a hurry, and I had to give notice to my landlord. Got a problem with that?
James Erickson, I found out about you and your so-called jobs.
Mrs. Cuthbert sneered the words like it left a bad taste in her mouth. Jimmy crossed his arms.
So?
You're a stripper, you're taking advantage of that poor girl.
You and that church are trying to toss her out on the street. Don't get all morally righteous on me. As her husband, the property is mine, and I will make sure your cult never gets its hands on it. Now take yourself and that junky-ass car of yours off my property. And the term you're looking for is exotic male dancer.
Jimmy shifted into a dancer's posture, bending his knees, and began thrusting his hips toward Mrs. Cuthbert. With each thrust he jumped toward her a fraction. Mrs. Cuthbert croaked out a sound of horror in her throat, and scrambled off the porch. Jimmy laughed at her loudly to be sure she heard, before closing the door. Rose shuffled out of her bedroom. Who was that?
Nothing, baby. Go back to bed. You need the rest.
Jimmy wrapped an arm around Rose's shoulder and guided her back to her room. Get in with me. I feel better with you there.
Of course.
Jimmy lay down next to Rose. She snuggled into his chest. Rose sat in Mr. Stawson's office. He had called her, requesting a visit. She hoped he could do something to get the BOJ to leave her and Jimmy alone. It had been a long 3 weeks since they'd got married, and Mrs. Cuthbert and Brother Carter seemed to be at the house on a daily basis with some complaint or threat. This time they threatened a court injunction against Jimmy being the rightful heir as her husband.
I was hoping James would have accompanied you,
Mr. Stawson said. Rose shifted in her seat. The hard wood and her nerves made it an extremely uncomfortable chair. He had to work for the funeral home today, she explained.
How many flutes have you found so far?
We found 11. And 11 Piper figurines. I don't think they're worth anything, but some of the instruments might be. Rose shrugged. She didn't want to sell off her mother's figurines. They were triggering memories she had long ago repressed, memories of a happy childhood she had forgotten in her misery. Stawson cleared his throat.
The church elders are becoming more and more aggressive regarding their claim to the property and bank accounts. You may need to sell the instruments until we can get them to accept that the inheritance goes to you and James. We finally located all of the bank accounts. You need to see this.
He slid a sheet of paper across his desk to her. Once Rose saw the account totals, she understood. The house was inconsequential. The BOJ was after the money. Stawson nodded, his expression grim.
This is awkward for me, but the church is trying to demand that a doctor certify that you are indeed married.
Rose blushed. Her mouth gaped open.
They can't, and I'm not even suggesting that you volunteer for such a thing. I'm warning you that they are going to drag this out for as long as they can.
Mrs. Cuthbert won't be happy until she's in my marriage bed. Rose cried.
It's not her who is making the claims, it's Carter Trace. He seems to be the driving force with the court.
That's Brother Carter. He does everything that Cuthbert woman tells him to do. It's been barely a month, and they're at my house every other day. Why can't they leave me alone? Rose's face grew hot with anger and embarrassment. Could they just look at her and know she'd only done it once when she was really drunk, and that Jimmy didn't think of her that way, no matter how often she now thought about him?
I'm afraid they aren't going to let this drop until you've spent all the money in those accounts on legal fees. We can file a restraining order against them for now. I'm sorry I didn't recommend that earlier.
Mr. Stossen's words bounced around in her brain as she trudged her way to the funeral home. She needed Jimmy. He would have good advice, and even if he didn't, being with him was soothing. She found him in the garage, running a polishing cloth over the hood of the hearse.
What's the matter, baby?
Jimmy's arms wrapped around her in a protective embrace as soon as she approached, but he didn't kiss her. Why don't you kiss me? We're married. Married people kiss. We should kiss. Rose's lips tingled as Jimmy's lips caressed them. Her mouth opened in pleasure and Jimmy's tongue teased hers. His lips pulled at something in her, and her body reacted, wanting more than only his kiss. He lifted his head away from her, ending the embrace.
I'm happy to kiss you, especially now that I know you want me to. So what's with this gloomy face?
The elders are gonna ask the court to request proof that we're really married.
Ha!
Jimmy furrowed his brow at Rose's statement.
That's what the marriage certificate is for.
They said they wanted to examine me. For evidence that we, had sex. She whispered the last words.
That's not going to happen, Rose. They can't do that. Who said they were going to do that?
Jimmy asked. Mr. Stossen.
He's being a pervy old man, and trying to find out if we've done it. The wackos at that church wouldn't do that. They are rude and greedy, but they're from a church.
Don't underestimate them, Jimmy. They want my father's money. I saw the figures today. It's a lot more than we realized.
It's never going to happen.
Jimmy shook his head. But it's okay, right? Didn't we already do it? The night before we got married? Rose stammered. The thought of having to undergo an exam for this particular reason made her stomach turn.
You got drunk and fell asleep. I didn't touch you. You're still, a virgin.
Jimmy whispered the last word.
I wouldn't take advantage of you like that.
Rose gulped. He hadn't touched her. He didn't like her enough to touch her. She had to ask him to kiss her. She felt so alone even while still in his embrace. I know you aren't interested in me, but... She swallowed again, trying to dissolve the tightness in her throat. Will you sleep with me in case they do get a court order? Jimmy looked over his shoulder.
No, Rose, I won't have sex with you to appease those church biddies.
He kept his voice low. His statement punched her in the gut. She pushed out of his embrace.
Hold on.
Jimmy caught her hands and held them with his larger ones.
I will make love to you as my bride and my wife.
Rose gaped up at Jimmy. You'll what?
Rose, when I married you, it was for real. I'm married to you here, where it counts.
Jimmy placed her hands over his heart.
I plan on winning you, no matter how slow I have to go, no matter how long it takes. I don't want to pressure you if you aren't ready.
Jimmy paused.
Hell, Rose, we never discussed our feelings for each other. I had already decided I wanted to date you, but you needed to get married. It never really went any further than that. And we haven't really talked about it since. You get so skittish whenever we get close.
I'm your wife and you still want to date me? Rose asked, confused.
Honestly, I want to skip all that dating stuff, all that will you or won't you crap, and be married to you. I want to have my wife in my bed, have a nice little home to raise kids in. And yeah, I want to woo my wife. I want to date that girl who cut off all of her hair and told me she wanted to eat pie and have sex for the first time.
I want to do that too. Rose's voice was small, almost a whisper. Jimmy sighed, staring into her eyes.
I want to be there for all of it, Rose. I would like to take you on a date, and I would like to make love with you.
I really married a stripper, Rose joked as Jimmy drove into Tahoe for his monthly dance gig.
Exotic male entertainer. You gonna watch this time, or hide in the corner again?
Jimmy didn't take his eyes off the road, but he smiled broadly. He was in an incredibly good mood ever since Rose asked if she could come with him tonight, even after the heavy lifting he had done today, from moving his furniture into the other bedroom. I'll try to watch, at least you. I want to watch you. Rose let her breath out slowly. She wanted to watch him, she wanted to touch him, she wanted all of him, and she was pretty certain tonight would be that night.
I'll make sure to dance just for you.
When they reached the club, Rose found the same corner seat in the bar while Jimmy disappeared backstage.
Hey, Jimmy's wife.
Rose pointed at her chest. Apparently last time I got wasted. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you must have had one bitch of a hangover.
Claudette laughed. Rose nodded slowly. Most definitely. Tonight I'm sticking with soda. The bartender was still laughing when she returned with Rose's drink. The lights dropped and the music got loud. This time Rose watched. It was the same dance routine as last month, 3 buff men and a stripper pole. It sounded like the opening line to a joke, only the blush that lit up her face was anything but funny. Jimmy hadn't come out yet, and she didn't know if she could watch the entire show. All these mostly naked men, all these screaming women. She swiveled around and made eye contact with Claudette.
Aren't you gonna watch your man this time?
It's also so much skin, Rose confessed. How can I be special when he does this?
Of course you are. This is for fun and tips. Besides, you get to go home with him,
Claudette explained. Rose spun back around as the music switched. Jimmy was out on stage in tight faded jeans and a plain white shirt. She could imagine that Jimmy performed for her alone. She could touch all of that if she wanted. He'd said so. He said it was up to her, her decision. He would wait, because he was falling in love with her. And she was stalling because she was already in love with him, and afraid. At the end of the night, Rose followed him back to the car. He had kissed her on the cheek, but she didn't know how to get him to start kissing her on the lips. She didn't know how to start the touching. Jimmy? He stopped on the top stair to the porch, turned and looked at her. Claudette said something at the club to me.
Aha.
He continued into the house. Rose followed. She said I get to go home with you at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Did she mean that of all the people there, I'm the one who gets to have sex with you?
That's exactly what she meant.
Jimmy dropped his duffel in the middle of the now clean living room and pulled Rose into an embrace.
What's this all about, baby?
I've come home with you. Can we? His eyes lit up like starlight. Rose let out a loud giggle as Jimmy swept her into his arms and carried her into his bedroom. He searched her face.
You know I love you, right? If you aren't ready.
She rested her palm against his cheek, trying to get him to look her in the eye. Her throat was dry, and the words came out in a raspy whisper. I love you. I think it's time I became Mrs. Erickson properly. When Jimmy's lips found Rose's, she melted into him. She stopped thinking and let her body feel. 6 weeks later.
Hey, baby.
Jimmy called out. Rose came out of the bathroom, her hand a clenched fist. What? She ignored her nerves as she pushed into the back room of the house. A room that had been shut up and used for collecting more of her father's garbage. She hadn't been able to open the door to this room for years. She hardly remembered it ever being used for anything other than a dumping ground.
Did you know there's another bathroom back here?
Oh, what? She asked as she stepped around more piles of junk and towards where Jimmy worked.
Yeah, this was a big bedroom with its own attached bath. There is a closet behind the big pile in the far corner.
I was never allowed in here. I wonder if this was my parents' bedroom.
Once I get it all cleaned up, it will be ours.
Good. Rose inched around a few remaining stacks of trash to peer into the bathroom that Jimmy had discovered. It wasn't large, but it was a full bath. 2 bathrooms is definitely better than 1. We'll need the space. Jimmy looked over at her.
What's that supposed to mean?
It means. Rose held out a marker-sized piece of lavender and white plastic. A small window in the top of the plastic piece showed 2 pink lines. I think the BOJ is finally going to leave us alone. Jimmy tripped over his own feet and a stack of garbage as he scrambled to get to Rose.
Are you serious? This means what I think this means. A baby. I'll drop this off at the lawyer's on my way to work this afternoon. That'll show them. Trying to claim we aren't really man and wife.
He set Rose down.
Have I mentioned how much I love you?
Rose giggled. You've said it a few times today, but I'll let you say it again.
I love you, Rose.
Rose pressed her lips to Jimmy's. I love you too.
This has been Piper's Daughter from the 12 Strippers of Christmas collection by Lulu M. Sylvian. Please like and subscribe for more holiday stripper shorts and other paranormal romance audiobooks.